Thank you. Honorable Minister Goyal, colleagues on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you today and an honor to address you. I will not focus my remarks on exclusively the issue of sustainable energy. There are much more eminent people on the dais who will tell you all about that, and besides, this is rapidly developing into India's success story. So let me talk about related issues and how we see them from the UN side of things. And before I do, I want to quote my Secretary General, who yesterday opened the new General Assembly session, which will commemorate 1 year of the signature of the SDGs, and there will be plenty of discussions in which India is going to be quite active in the coming 30 to 60 days, and certainly in the high-level segment about a week from now. And when he opened the General Assembly this weekend, he was referring to that a year ago, 193 heads of state and government signed the Sustainable Development Goals, and he said, they said, we can build a world free of poverty. We can have a world with gender equality and where all children are enrolled in quality schools. We can have a healthy planet and a future where we leave no one behind. And then he said, we are the first generation that can end poverty, and then we are the last generation that can tackle climate change before it is too late. And if you think about it, it's a starking contrast of, I think, the responsibility that is on our generation and on our leaders and on our countries. And frankly, I know I don't make myself terribly popular with the Indian government when I stress the responsibility of India and the success of the whole SDG dimension, because really India today to the SDGs is much more important and much bigger than what China was to the Millennium Development Goals. Literally, if India does not succeed, the SDGs and the UN don't succeed. So in a way, we're tied at the hip to each other because India's agenda, as ambitious as it is, it must succeed. Now, having said that, I'm one of the big optimists. I'm privileged and thrilled to actually be here in India for this assignment in my career, because I firmly believe that this is India's decade. I firmly believe that India is on the rise. I firmly see on the international stage that India is acquiring a role and a place which I don't think it had before in decades past or since its independence. Thank you. And that's why we in the UN, we firmly believe, just because of the weight, the size, the complexity of India, a lot of the solutions for the development problems of the world will be invented in India in the next 10 to 15 years. And I'm very pleased to be on this panel, because what Minister Goyal and his team have done, are doing, and will still do in the energy sector of India is maybe one of those examples, because even in our discussions on the International Solar Alliance with various parties and contributors and countries, we are already saying that, well, what India did with photovoltaics, we can replicate in Africa, you know, if the market can be aggregated. So we're already stepping out there and saying, well, India's market and complexity of its development is so tremendous that India will come out with low-cost, innovative, technology-driven, disruptive solutions in the coming 10, 15 years that other parts of the world will use for itself. I'm absolutely certain of that. I mean, look, who ever posed in the world the problem of skilling 400 million Indians in a period of, 7 or 10 years? Nobody's faced this problem before, right? Or putting out 175 gigawatts of renewables. Nobody's ever done that before, right? Or, fulfilling Swachh Bharat targets, or doing other things. India cannot do it in the traditional way because it'll take 150 years, right? So India has to come out with solutions like what is emerging to be the success story in renewables and in photovoltaics, And interestingly enough, India is also pointing out the way to the models of the future of how to solve development problems. Because frankly, from our perspective in the UN, the old development model of official development assistance being driven through the UN and through a bunch of NGOs and being given to governments and, spent that model is dead. It is dead. Financially, if you look at the challenges of the SDGs, the financial gap between what is available and what is needed is different by a factor. By a factor. Where is that money going to come from? It can only come from a symbiosis of what used to be called private-public partnerships, what we today are calling blended financing or pool funding or complex financial models. But I think what the minister certainly will be hopefully speaking about in a minute is how that is actually being achieved in this particular energy sector today in India. Because frankly, I don't have the numbers. I'm sure he may. But the public investment into this emerging success story has been fairly limited. I mean, the government has created the policy network. The states have created a policy framework. There has been some initial funding to subsidize this rollout, but essentially, I don't know, Minister, 80%, 90% of the money in this emerging success story is that of the private sector. But it's easy to do, or relatively easy to do in the power sector when it's rolled out en masse. The problem that we see in the UN, including in India, is that no matter what sector we talk about, whether it's power, whether it's agriculture, whether it's rural development, whether it's certain benefits or excluded groups, the same number always comes up. And in India, that number is around 200 million people. And somehow, no matter which program we look at or which effort we look at, there's always that 200 million people that are kind of left behind. Because maybe the electricity line will not reach their villages in the coming, 5 or 10 years, or maybe they will not get access to a proper school or a proper health facility or a proper something. And you remember that the SDGs and the big goal there is actually leave no one behind. So while the government is moving ahead with these very ambitious programs to end open defecation and get power to as many people as they possibly can, I think what we want to focus on in the UN, and very much with industry, is how to find sustainable, profitable, okay, moderately profitable, but still profitable, financial models at the bottom of the pyramid. How do we reach those 200 million people in India that, one way or another, will not fit into the bigger programs? Or we fear might not fit into those bigger programs. How do we find sustainable solutions to deploy mini-grids in remote areas, in the mountains, at a pace where people actually see real power 24/7 within a reasonable period of time? Where it just doesn't make sense, commercially or otherwise, to drag an electricity line, over the hills that is going to cost millions. How do we reach the targets of Swachh Bharat and ending open defecation within 3-5 years? What are some of the commercial solutions to those problems? How do we create recycling models and create a recycling industry in India based on small businesses that are profitable in Indian circumstances and that can recycle a lot of the waste, plastic, metal, glass, and otherwise, and create an economy, as the Prime Minister says, that transfers waste to wealth? How do you actually make it happen in business terms? Because the public sector is not going to deal with these issues. So I think if I leave any messages with you in the audience, it is two things from the UN's perspective. One, as I said, India will invent the solutions that the world will use in the next 15 to 20 years to resolve some of the SDG challenges. I'm absolutely convinced about that. How do we together here between the government, the business, with or without the support of the UN and others like us, like CII and other associations, how do we help generate the conversation that finds these solutions that are profitable, that are scalable, that are quickly deployable, that are successful within a reasonable period of time of certainly one generation. That is issue number one. And number two, how do we take care of those who might possibly be left behind? And how do we ensure that these models are applicable to them so that the people out there get an education, get a healthcare facility, get energy, diversify their income, emerge from poverty? Because ultimately for India, it is about poverty. At the end of the day, we can address it in many different ways, we can call it many different things, but India needs to move forward in its fast development trajectory, but first and foremost by eliminating poverty in the next 10 to 15 years, similar but better to what China did in the previous 10 to 15 years. Thank you very much to all. I wish you all the success in this discussion and in the 2 days, and looking forward to working with you. Thank you.